Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It is Thursday, November 20th. I don't know why I said October. Brent had a brain fart there, but yeah, today is Thursday, November 20th, 2025. It is 2:55 p.m. as I'm recording this. 56 degrees outside. Basically, it's going to be a little raining according to my phone, where they say showers in the vicinity. So we'll see what happens while I record this. But yeah, we are also a week away from Thanksgiving, so by this time next week, I should say, by this time next week, I should be at one of my family members' houses for Thanksgiving, whether it's down the road, basically 15, 20 minutes from here, or basically another additional 10 minutes added on to that, or 40 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever you want to call it, in the Modesto Empire region. But with that said, before we get started, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to ask you to do me a solid favor. That's like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, and share the video. Also, guys, please do me a solid favor and click on the links in the description. You can find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube. You can find me at all your favorite audio and video podcast platforms like iTunes, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, Audible, Amazon Music, Radio Public, and to an extent, SiriusXM. You can also find me at other video outlets like Rumble.com, Odyssey.com, Dailymotion, and VENMO. Also, guys, I have a Patreon if you want to help support over at Patreon, and I have a Venmo and a Cash App. It would be greatly appreciated if you could look into those. I'm also on DeviantArt at BVW1979 and InkBunny.net at BWRoset. Also, guys, I have a couple of online stores. One is a Fourth Wall store that's recently new. Got a couple of items there. Check those out if you would like. And I have the OG Teespring store. Link for that is at the bottom, while the link for the Fourth Wall store is at the top. Also, guys, if you want to follow me on social media, you can find me at TikTok. I got a couple of neat things up on TikTok there. I think you will like. Also, you can also find me, I should say, at Blue Sky and Twitter, aka X.com. Also, guys, during this video premiere, if you would like to do me a solid favor, chime in the live chat, give your thoughts on what I'm about to say here and everything. As well as if you feel in the mood, you can also donate through SuperChats. SuperChats would be greatly appreciated if you could do that. And on both occasions, video premiere and afterwards, you can also comment in the comment section. Now, if you don't get here in time for the video premiere and you still want to help donate to the channel and the brand, you can also do so with the Super Thanks option, which is a little heart with $ sign. Now, with that said and out of the way, let's get on to the topic at hand here. And, you know, since the Season 2 finale this past Tuesday into Wednesday for Hazbin Hotel, obviously it's got a lot of people talking. I mean, one of the videos I did afterwards, which is really climbing up there, and I thank you guys very much about that, is my thoughts on the ROO character that I feel is coming very soon to the Hellaverse when it comes to both Hazbin Hotel and Helluva Boss. But what's interesting is people are also capitalizing on this ROO discussion, if you will, and what her role will be and how it connects to other characters. And I thought about this. I thought about this, I should say, and just reading what people have to say at Facebook and hearing what people have to say on YouTube and elsewhere. It really got me thinking, as to whether or not they might be onto something. And as you could see, I should say, with the video, not the video, with the image that I'm using for this audio, video, and podcast, as you could see, as I try to clear this here we go, using my tablet. But basically, a lot of people feel that there are certain characters that are connected to this ROO. That they're connected to ROO in some shape or form or fashion. And one person, I think very recently, as of today, or if not late last night, gave their thoughts on what they think is going to happen coming into Season 3 and how it connects with ROO. This is what the one person said. I didn't put the name up here or anything, so that way if they say anything, or if somebody points it out or whatever, they won't get mad or anything. So I hid their name, so I did that for respectfully. But I wanted to share their thoughts on what they put on the Facebook group page. And this is what they said. And if you're curious, I will say that the Facebook group page is one of the Hazbin Hotel / Helluva Boss group pages. One is just by that name, and then one has the 18 plus in parentheses, or in between parentheses. Anyway, this is what the person said. And again, you can probably see this on the video, obviously. But this is what they said, and I quote as I bring it up. They say, I predict in Season 3 that there will be more than one antagonist, as Lute will have mentally deteriorated and perhaps be influenced by Eve/ROO. Now, that's another thing people have been bringing up. They're wondering if maybe Eve, and Roundtable even brought this up, Roundtable Bids here on YouTube, when they talked about what ROO's role will be, they even brought up the potentiality that ROO could be Eve and vice versa. So that might, that might sound very interesting to really think about and intriguing to really just, kind of look at all the clues, all the hints, here and there as to, exactly whether or not there is some kind of, connection between the two, and if they are one in the same, if they are one in the same, if you will, down the line, so it'll be really, like I said, really interesting to see maybe if there is some kind of connection between the two. But continuing on, they say Alastor for sure will come under the influence of ROO as well, and overlords will start disappearing again. Rosie, who's cannibal, but has been very, I guess you could say, motherly-like towards, or anti-like, very anti, aunt, motherly-like towards, towards Charlie. They explain that Rosie will be the one to give the backstory on ROO and why she's so dangerous. It'll also be revealed Rosie's connection to heaven and Sera. And, that's something there too, because a lot of people are like, they look at Rosie, like, why do you have this character and everything? Why do you have this character that's basically, he's like, why do you have this character that is, basically, very nice? She's a cannibal, she's an overlord herself and everything. And obviously she has, she's obviously has a lot of power to have control at the time, for a time, for a long time over, someone like Alastor. So you got to wonder, like, okay, what is that connection, that she might have with Sera? Because it feels like, yeah, she's a cannibal, but she feels like she's the kind of cannibal that could be easily redeemed and be in heaven, or meant to be in heaven, if you will. That's how people are, are viewing it. They're looking at it like, she could be that kind of a character, if you will. And I do apologize if I sound distracted. I'm looking outside my front window. There's a couple of cats in the street, and I don't want them to get hit or anything. So hold on for a second, guys. Hold on. All right, sorry about that. Had to make sure that our neighbor's cats wouldn't get, hit or anything. But anyway, like I said, a lot of people, let me kind of correct myself a little bit because, again, I got distracted there. But, a lot of people feel, that, Eve has this connection with Sera, obviously, because even though she's a cannibal, I think the reason people say that she has this connection with heaven and Sera is because when you look at the finale, when you look at the finale itself and everything, and after Alastor's deal with her is broken, due to Charlie, basically using her favor to declare Vox as the ultimate sinner, you notice that the light that came out of her, a lot of people, a lot of people pointed that out, like, hey, that light looked very angelic, like, what's the deal here? And, it could have been just a design choice, as some people put it, but a lot of people also looked at it like, yeah, it could be a design choice, but it could also mean something more. And if it means something more, it can mean that she has this kind of connection with heaven, but if that's the case, then why is she down below? Like, why is she in hell and not in heaven? Why is she a cannibal in hell and, not in heaven? Why is she an overlord to an extent and not in heaven? Why does she have this power and control that she does, even to the point that for a time, for the longest time, she had control over Alastor's soul. Like, why is she there and everything and not there? So, especially if she has, a vested interest in Charlie in a very nurturing kind of way, like, mentoring, motherly kind of way. And that's a good theory. That's a good theory to, to think about. And that's the one thing about this show is it's one of those kind of shows, along with Helluva Boss and many others that have come out from the independent side of animation and even the more established side of animation, to where if it's good, it's got people's attention, and it makes you thirst and want for more. It also makes you want to theorize and speculate what's going to come next. And sometimes you could be on the money, you could be close, or you could be way off. There's no doubt. But in the case of, but in this case, there might be some, I guess you could say, credence to it. Might be some, evidence to back it up, and all that, because, if ROO, is, this, powerful entity, and it seems like it was hinted at even more so in the finale, when Cherry and Husk came to Angel's rescue, and everything, it makes you wonder, like, how powerful is she? Like, how powerful of an entity, is this character, outside of what's been described? Like, is she going to be, as I, put it in my own descriptive way yesterday in the video, will she be like the Thanos, the dark side, the Galactus, the be-all, end-all, if you will, when it comes to these Hellaverse, it's like how powerful is she to the point that, a lot of people are, basically taking this time and theorizing the connections these characters have. Because again, when you look at the fact, and I'll read this again, just in case you guys didn't get it the first time, and I do apologize for that. This is a person on one of the Facebook group pages, the Hazbin Hotel / Helluva Boss Facebook group page, and this is what they said, and I quote, "I predict in Season 3 there will be more than one antagonist, as Lute will have mentally deteriorated and perhaps be influenced by Eve / ROO." Now that's a good theory right there, because we saw in the finale, that when Lute was sent down with Abel to go get Emily, that Lute could care less about getting Emily out of there. All she wanted was the opportunity for revenge. And that basically she was going to use the cannon before she dueled it out with Vaggie, or Vag, if you will. Basically, she was dueling it out with her. She was dueling it out with her and everything. But before that, she was wanting to use the cannon, this weapon of mass destruction, if you will, on Charlie, on Vag, and even Emily to an extent, to Abel, basically, as some people finally, put it, grew a spine, and basically said, no, enough's enough. Enough of this crap. I'm in charge, you back down right now and get back to heaven. And that's what happened. Lute had to back down, and a lot of people brought up the fact that Lute, when she saw Abel wearing that mask that Adam would wear, it's like she started to have this PTSD, it's like she just stood there for a moment, and she didn't see Abel, she saw Adam, and it's like, that PTSD basically made her obey. Like, it's like, as I've said before, you think, with Adam gone, she'd be thrilled with that. She'd be thrilled with the opportunity to basically, take charge, take command, do things her way, but she doesn't want to because, as I've alluded to before, and a lot of people, I'm pretty sure, has agreed with this in their own way, she was in love with Adam. She was in love with Adam, so basically losing the love of her heavenly life, if you will, makes her spiteful and vengeful, to avenge him, to, get back at those that took him away from her before she can even, admit her feelings. So, her being in a situation to where maybe ROO could influence her and everything, because as this person puts it, she would have mentally deteriorated. Yeah, that's a good theory. That's a good possibility, because again, she gets sent down there with Abel to get Emily, and she could care less about that. She would even go as far as we saw, like I mentioned, to use that same weapon that Vox was using on Hell itself, if not on Charlie, Vag, and even Emily to an extent, to get her vengeance. That's how far gone she's becoming. So for this theory that this person is putting, that hey, she could potentially end up in a situation where mentally she has gone, that mentally she is so far gone, I'm trying to find the right words to say before I have a brain fart there, to where she's so far gone that even someone as sinister and vile and just downright the evilest of evils, even for hell, could get an influence on Lute. and everything, and control her and get her to do her bidding, on the heaven side of things, that's a good theory. That is a good theory to go down and, probably keep noted of, keep in your notes of theories as to something that maybe Vizzy is going to do, if not potentially explore. Now, Alastor, obviously, they look at the fact that Alastor already kind of represents that. When you look at, his shadowy silhouette and everything, and how he acts, and how he was in the real world, here on Earth, if you will, when he was alive. I mean, it's obvious that, yeah, he's probably going to be the easiest, if not the first, to fall under the influence of ROO, if he's not already, because that's the one thing I was thinking about. We know he made a deal with Rosie when he was alive, right? We know he made a deal with Rosie when he was alive. But who's to say he didn't make a deal with ROO first, to get the power or get access, to contact Rosie? Who's to say he didn't who's to say he didn't get a deal made? That's what I'm trying to find. He didn't get a deal made with ROO first, and then by making that deal, he was able to obtain the knowledge he needed to make the deal and contact Rosie to make that deal in the process, if that made any sense there. Who's to say that? Because again, you look at, his, how powerful he is, from the get-go. Yeah, he gets weakened and everything, but you see how powerful and manipulative he is. And you see all that, and then, like I say, you see the silhouette that he has, and how very, very reminiscing, of, the silhouette or the designs connected with ROO. You have to ask yourself, did he make a deal with ROO first before he made a deal with Rosie? And I know you might ask, well, why would he make a deal with Rosie, soul, where she would have control of his soul to allow him to be powerful? Why would she do that, or why would he do that if he made a deal with ROO? Because it's real simple. ROO, the way she's being presented, she's not stupid. She's intelligent. She realizes that as powerful as she is, right now she's in a weakened state. Right now she is in a state to where she has to, hide. She has to be in hiding, but also be in that hiding, watching kind of situation where she could see everything going on, in both Hazbin Hotel and Helluva Boss. She could see everything going on, but she can't do nothing about it. And the reason she can't do nothing about it is because the overlords that are there, like Rosie, will prevent her from, accomplishing whatever she wants to accomplish. Because she's smart enough to realize someone like Rosie, might be worthy of the power she has, but she also senses the good in Rosie. That Rosie could be one of those that, if the opportunity presents itself, could be redeemed and end up in heaven, and that's the last thing she wants. That's the last thing, ROO would want. So, obviously, my opinion, my speculation, is Alastor made a deal with her first, because I think Alastor, when you think about it, is one of those cult worshippers of ROO, like we saw in the first episode of Helluva Boss, with that mother. So obviously that had to be, obviously I should, hold on, I'm getting a brain fart here, hold on. Alright, sorry about that, I had a brain fart and getting tongue-tied. But like I said, it's obvious that he has to be from a similar, if not the same kind of cult, that we saw the mother, represent in the first episode of Helluva Boss. So, to me, it would make some logical sense. He makes a deal with ROO first, and part of that deal is to make a deal with Rosie, so that when the time is right, he can break that deal, and Rosie basically will be a little weakened. Like, she'll still be powerful, but now she's going to be like, easier to pretty much get out of the way for, ROO's eventual return. So, that's just my opinion. But then, speaking of Rosie, they do mention she could be the one to give the backstory on ROO and why she's so dangerous, and it would also reveal her connection to heaven and Sera. And like I said earlier, before I got distracted, I think the situation with Rosie is she's a cannibal and everything, an overlord cannibal that basically should have probably ended up in heaven, but because she did some things later on in her life that, obviously were unforgivable, even at least at that time, instead of heading to heaven, she instead headed to hell. But the silver lining for her is that she ended up becoming an overlord because of what she had done in life, from a negative and neutral perspective. So that's how I think there's a connection there and everything. And I think the connection to Sera is kind of, the conflicted leader, if you will, of the angels and all that, outside of the speaker of God. So, so my thought on that is, back on Earth when they were both alive, I think Sera and Rosie might have been friends. But they had a difference of opinion and maybe a falling out, and that falling out is what caused one to go to heaven, one to go to hell, and all that because of difference of opinions and so on. So that just might be a theory and a theory that myself and others have that could be wrong. But I think if there is a connection, as this person's pointed out, that's the most obvious in my opinion. And I think all it takes is like one ultimate sacrifice or one ultimate, redeeming quality coming out of Rosie for her to probably end up in heaven and show that even the overlords of hell can be redeemed and become, an integral part of heaven in the future. So that's a possibility. That might be what's going to be revealed here, according if this person's right and everything. But they also state that basically all the overlords will start disappearing again. And again, the reason I bring that up is like I said earlier. The reason they bring that up, ladies and gentlemen, is because of the fact that, Alastor, in my opinion, made a deal with ROO when he was alive before he made that deal with Rosie. And it's all part of a domino effect like plan to where he makes these deals with these overlords, if you will. An overlord like Vox, which he did during this past season, as well as the deal he's had with Rosie, both he was able to break, and by breaking both, he was able to kind of weaken them, if you will, to a point that essentially, Rosie had to make the deal she did to fix his staff, and Vox basically, even though he was more powerful due to Charlie's decree, reluctantly, was now basically on the same even playing field, as Alastor, but Alastor had a little bit more of a slight edge, maybe not, and everything, because Alastor, he's been positioned as a manipulator, as a very vile manipulator, that you can't, trust one way or another. So in my opinion, the overlords, I should say, if I said overlanders, I do apologize, but the overlords, them disappearing, if what this person's saying is true, them vanishing from sight, I think honestly will be due to Alastor making deals with them and breaking those deals that will open the door for ROO to show up. That's just my opinion. And we might even, because of that, see Alastor cross over into Helluva Boss and make deals there and break them as well to open that, floodgate. And thus, as I mentioned earlier, it would lead to a multi-part crossover finale for both shows in the potential final seasons, that being the fourth and final seasons in a couple of years or several years. But again, I read this, I look at this, and I can't argue with it. But I can add on to it like I did. So I believe honestly, in my opinion, my honest opinion, I believe honestly, I should say, that there is some truth. They might be onto something. There might be some truth to this, but I also believe Alastor, in my honest opinion, made a deal. He made a deal. This is just my opinion. He made a deal with ROO before he made the deal with Rosie because it's all part of ROO's master plan. And thus that's why he made the deal with Vox, and then probably made some other deals with Overlanders, in the past, if not will be making them, because it's all part of her plan, if you will, that being ROO, to get them out of the way with Alastor's help, and thus she can rise, to power. She can be what she used to be that threat, be that Thanos, be that ultimate evil that seems virtually unstoppable, and in the process, I think she's going to betray Alastor. I think that's obvious. Because basically I think what's going to happen is Alastor will do all this for her, had done this and will be doing all this for her, and then in the end, when he's hoping for some kind of reward or a thank you or gratitude, she's going to betray him. She's going to zap him of his power, and then he's going to realize that all he ever was since the get-go, even when he was alive, was nothing more than a pawn. Just a pawn in her game that she doesn't need anymore. So that potentially is what I think we're going to see happen, in my opinion, to add on to what this person said at one of the Facebook group pages. But what do you guys think? Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments if you haven't already in the live chat. Let me know if you think this person's onto something, and if you think I'm onto something with some of the things I added on about where we could be heading as we head into the final 2 seasons for both shows that I still believe are going to close out their existence or their current run, with a multi-part crossover finale for both shows. Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, guys. And until next time, as I said at the beginning, do me a solid favor. Like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, share the video, and click on the link in the description to find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube, as well as support me outside of YouTube as well. But give me your thoughts, guys, and I do apologize if I was a little distracted earlier. I had to go take care of what I had to take care of. But until next time, let me know what your thoughts are, and I am out.